Hello, guys, and welcome to a new episode of Decentra Talks. I am your host, Ciro, and today I have with me Paul, or DeFi Bro. Paul, you can go ahead and introduce yourself if you'd like.
Hey, Sarah. Nice to be here again. My name is Paul. I have been working in DeFi and researching in DeFi for about 2 years now, and it's pretty much all I do these days. So I'm happy to share anything that I know that you want to find out about.
Well, first, I'd like to, again, maybe ask you, how did you get into DeFi in the first place? It's always nice to hear different people's stories. What was the process for you? How did you get introduced to it?
Totally by accident, I heard about yield farming. My friend was doing a lot of it. He was very excited about it. He helped me set up a wallet. I put in some money into Alchemix, lost pretty much all of it, but learned a lot in the process. And I saw the value in DeFi long term, and I understood that just kind of following somebody else, not really knowing what you're doing, is not the way to go. So I pretty much quit my job at the time and I started researching this stuff full time.
And are you still mostly into the yield farming stuff, or do you generally deal with
No, I mean DeFi
how
has definitely
involved are you?
evolved. Yeah, DeFi has definitely evolved. So I don't do much yield farming at this point. Um, I do think there's some good opportunities with options trading that I'm exploring now, but it's still very, very new. So I wouldn't necessarily recommend it to anyone, but I'll definitely recommend for people to keep an eye out for it and learn how it works, because that might just be the next big thing, at least in DeFi.
Yeah, I'm very for me it feels like yield farming ever since I started really diving into this, I've always been very cautious with it because it does I don't understand how it works. It seems to me like anything that's promising you money for just putting your assets somewhere and you get promised a amount of money every month or every year, it doesn't make sense to me. Would you be able to maybe explain it a little bit?
Yeah, sure. Let me take a stab at it. I think the big difference between DeFi and traditional finance is that in DeFi, almost every marketplace is kind of two-sided. What I mean by that is, in traditional markets, big banks will come in and they'll help make the markets on Nasdaq or Dow Jones or whatever, and they're going to get paid a lot of money to provide the liquidity so that the market could be very active. Anyone could put a trade through and it'll go through. In DeFi, the protocol itself doesn't provide any liquidity. Usually doesn't provide any liquidity to what they're doing. So in order for Uniswap to work, liquidity providers have to come in and put their money in. In TradFi, it's probably, and I don't know that much about TradFi, but I'm guessing it's like the likes of Goldman Sachs or BlackRock that are doing this. An average investor doesn't get to walk into Nasdaq and say, "Hey, let me help you make your markets. I have about $2,000. Can you guys pay me out a little bit? As you're making money with my $2,000." It doesn't work that way. But in DeFi, because of permissionless nature of it, anyone can come in, put in $100, $10, $2,000, $2 million, and help make the markets on Uniswap or Sushi or any other AMM. And for that, they get paid, right? Because as trades go through, liquidity providers have to get paid for providing the liquidity. And for me, it's very special. It's very different, way more democratized. And so you're not getting paid for nothing. You're getting paid because in a way, you're putting your liquidity on the line so that people could make trades.
That's actually a really good explanation. I've not had much experience in any traditional finance, so I can see where you're coming from now. Like, by providing liquidity for these people, you are allowing all these services to run, and that's what's generating the yield that you're getting.
Yeah, and that's only one aspect of it, obviously, but I think it's the easiest one to understand.
I see. I see the 20% numbers, and to me that just totally breaks my brain. I don't understand how you could get 20% on yield on something, and now that we've seen multiple different exchanges go down, I've just become more and more risk like averse. So I kind of shut all the thoughts of trying it out. So I might look into it now. Thanks for explaining again. So
Yeah, and let's be clear. I mean, none of the decentralized exchanges have failed.
yes, that's true. I love having my crypto in my own wallet. I don't like leaving anything on any exchange. It just seems like a bad idea overall. The one thing that is positive about banks, I assume, is that you are covered financially. There's those FCIS laws. So if something happens to the bank, you're always going to be made full as long as it's like, I think, below $250,000. We don't have that in crypto. So giving access to your funds to somebody or to a exchange is very risky. And I don't see myself doing it anytime soon. I only ever used exchanges as an on ramp or an off ramp. And I think that's how it's going to stay.
Yeah, that's interesting, and it's funny you mentioned FDIC because I believe like Voyager actually advertised that the FDIC insured, which was totally misleading to investors because if you read the fine print, I mean, any of your crypto deposits were not FDIC insured. So I think one specific aspect of their business was FDIC insured, and so they were like able to say, "Hey, we're FDIC insured." In reality, when they collapsed, you know, the average retail depositor was totally screwed. And again, that's a centralized entity, so very different from anything in DeFi.
Do you see in the future, do you see it possibly like some kind of FDIC system, but for crypto? Do you think that that's coming in the future?
Oh man, it's a really tough problem to solve, and that's going to take a while if it will ever get solved. I mean, I'm sure somebody will think of things, but for now, getting any kind of insurance on in DeFi is so expensive to the point where I'm not even sure it really makes sense. And then, as we saw with Luna, when some of those deposits were insured, I think like the insurance just kind of went insolvent because how are you going to refund to $20 billion, right? And unfortunately, as long as these things continue to happen, insurance is not really going to be viable. Once the markets get more stable, the APIs get stable, um, I'm sure people will figure it out. But until then, it's going to be a little bit of wild, wild west. And that's partially why 20% shouldn't be breaking your brain because you're taking risks.
I see. Recently, I've heard like I think there was a bank in Philly, like a traditional bank, that took out a $100 million loan from I believe it was MakerDAO, and their token DAI. So there's starting to be some crossovers between traditional finance and all this new DeFi stuff. So maybe it is in the future. I just think about it a lot because I see that it's extremely like risky, and I would hope that people manage to do their research before interacting with something like this. But yeah, what chains are you mostly using?
I mean, I've been all over the place. Obviously, mainnet was my introduction to DeFi. Well, actually, I'm not sure if that's obvious, but that's what it was. At the time, it was when I first used mainnet, the fees were very manageable. Then they obviously skyrocketed, where at one point I think depositing into Aave was like $100 gas fee. So that priced me out. I moved to the second chain I ever used was Polygon, I think. Then Avalanche. Trying to think what else was there during that time. Terra Chain, right? I used that for a minute. I used Cosmos briefly. I used some Moonbeam and some other stuff that like Harmony that honestly is kind of irrelevant at this point to me. Currently, I am really into the rollups. I mean, we came back full circle. Everybody was saying that the mainnet rollups are going to be a big thing, and now they're here. And especially Arbitrum and Optimism, you see a lot of liquidity flowing there. Optimism is putting out a lot of incentives to use the protocols built on Optimism. ZK Sync rollups are around the corner. I think some of them are already live, or the testnets are live. Um, and yeah, that's what I'm most excited about. And at this point, I'm pretty much just using mainnet, Optimism, and Arbitrum.
I've mostly been using Polygon myself, and I see that Polygon recently has they've been crushing it in terms of business development. I think they've had deals now with Disney, Starbucks, um, like a lot of other different like regular traditional businesses, and I see a great future in it. I have used Optimism to buy tickets to events, and that's been pretty great, but I've had very minimal interaction with them, so I kind of want to learn more about it. Maybe you could share your experience and um, tell us about what you do there. Why do you think it's a good chain to be on right now?
Sure. So the user experience on these optimistic rollups, that's what they're called, is quite nice. I mean, as soon as you press the button, your transaction kind of goes through. There's a 7-day period where someone could kind of dispute your transaction, in case you somehow manage to trick the mechanism, which is probably very unlikely. But the point is that, within 7 days, somebody could kind of dispute your transaction. And to me, the way I understand this is it's kind of like a check where you write out a check, and then you can kind of block that check, or there might not be enough funds in your account. And then the bank will have to get involved and kind of arbitrate, like, hey, what happened here? Oh, this check was no good, it bounced. Like, we need to go after this person. Or, maybe this check was fraudulent. Like, we need to go after the receiver, right? So that's kind of the system they have on the optimistic rollups, that they'll kind of finalize the transaction immediately. Like, as soon as you click it, it's like kind of there. But then there's like a 7-day period where someone could find a rogue validator or something. And, that's a little bit too technical. I don't fully understand how that would work. But that's the gist of it. Then in terms of what I do on these chains, what I would recommend is just kind of going to either optimism.io, or I think arbitrum.io. So pretty simple links. And you'll see on Optimism, for example, under the ecosystem, you can go to all apps or quests or get started. They really do a nice job showcasing the apps that are there. I mean, if you go to the apps in Optimism, there's Lyra, Synthetics, Stales, Quix, Perpetual Protocol, Pull Together, Uniswap, Velodrome, and all these others. And it'll even list which ones have live incentives. And I think Arbitrum is something very, very similar. So that would be like a good starting point. And because the fees are so low, I mean, for the most part, I think I'm paying, 10 cents or less. And usually I think it's in the single digits. You can put in $100 and just kind of play with all these apps just to learn how they work. And most likely, hint, hint, you qualify for an airdrop.
I have a someone who I've worked closely with, who his career basically, at least since last year, has been hunting for these airdrops, interacting with different protocols, figuring out information, and it's been very profitable for him. He spends a lot of time on it. Obviously, it's like a full-time job, but there are a lot of rewards that are being given to people for just simply interacting with these protocols. And you can take, like you said, $100, and you could just move those tokens around different protocols. You don't even have to like invest 100 in each one, but just by moving, you automatically become eligible for airdrops, and that can really be nice. First you learn, second you get rewarded for learning. I wanted to ask you, have you done a lot of like airdrop hunting or farming? Is this something that you do usually?
Not as much as I should, because it could be quite lucrative. Um, I do think that the Arbitrum airdrop is probably coming. I think the ZK Sync airdrop is coming. I believe Optimism still has another airdrop in the works, because I think there's some tokens still dedicated to that. So I am definitely trying now. I think kind of trying to farm them out with different wallets and do all of that is A, kind of dishonest, and B, um, the more you try to do that, the more the owners of these protocols are going to try to come up with ways to prevent you from getting the airdrops, right? Because that's not who they're designed for. Um, so yeah, I haven't been doing as much as I should, but I've gotten a couple just because I was organically using the apps. And I think that's probably the best strategy. I mean, just take your time, learn, use these tools, and hopefully you'll organically qualify for some airdrops down the line.
My thoughts on airdrops, I mean, field, I see that, yeah, like you said, a lot of people do this as a sort of job, and they build these systems. They use a lot of different wallets. They interact, and they try to basically game the system and get as much out of it as possible. And I find it to be perhaps ineffective at what it's trying to do, which is help get some organic growth and help motivate people and incentivize people to try out new things. But from what I've seen on Twitter and from my experience with my coworkers, is this is a very abusable system, and it takes a lot more resources to make sure that the airdrops are going to the right places. So I question the effectiveness of it, and I think that maybe there would be better ways to incentivize use that would cause less things like Sybil attacks, where people create, like you said, a bunch of wallets and try to drain as much as possible from each protocol. Do you think that there could be a better way to incentivize use?
Yeah, I think live incentives, in my opinion, work a little bit better. Although all those issues you mentioned, I think also apply to live incentives. People could just move into these apps, deposit a bunch of money, and as soon as the incentives are gone, they'll move on to the next thing. So it's not all fully organic uh, use anyway. But yeah, I mean, it's a tough problem to solve. I mean, if a protocol like Optimism has tokens and some tokens are designated to just give to the community, it's never going to be perfect. But airdrops, live incentives, they work because a lot of liquidity has flown into Optimism, and then a lot of liquidity has flown into Arbitrum because everyone's expecting the airdrop. So it kind of works, and a lot of people maybe come just for the airdrops or to farm them out. But I think once they use the apps, I think a lot of people will see the value and actually stay, or so I hope.
Could you clarify on live incentives? I'm familiar with airdrops, but I'm not sure what live incentives are.
So, like for example, back in the day on the Aave, if you deposited some ETH and borrowed USDC against it, your ETH deposit would earn like 1%, and like your USDC deposit will cost like 4%. But you would also collect Aave tokens as a live incentive for participating in the protocol. And that would depends on the time and whatever, but that could be as high as like 8% just for participating in this market. And so that actually meant you getting paid to borrow money, which was great. Now on Optimism, they have live incentives. So for example, in Pull Together, which is a pretty simple protocol, right? You just deposit USDC and they yield farm with it as a big protocol. And then whatever the yield farm profit is, they'll kind of lottery that out to among everyone who's deposited USDC in it. And so, normally there's $1 million in the protocol. They'll yield farm for a day. They'll earn 0.001%, and that will just go to the users. But now on Optimism, on top of that, you also earning just Optimism tokens just for participating because it's a live incentive. Like Optimism wants you to use Pull Together through Optimism instead of through mainnet or Avalanche. So they're giving these extra Optimism tokens, trying to decentralize the protocol, trying to give users rewards. So on top of whatever you were earning, now you're also earning 2% Optimism tokens. So that it's a nice way to get people to come to your chain and use it. Whether they stay or not after the incentives are done, that's a different question.
I see. Thanks for explaining. I one of the protocols that I use the most worked on is Ricochet Exchange, and they have this system of kind of rewarding users where you get a payment stream to you as long as you're using the platform. So instead of giving you like upfront like $100, for example, you would get a very, very tiny amount for every second you're using the application, which I feel would work really well, because then you're incentivizing people to keep going instead of hunting for the airdrop and then when it's done you leave. I hope to see more of that integrated into different protocols. I feel like that would really, for me at least, it would really incentivize use, because I know as long as I'm there, I am getting rewarded. In a lot of cases, it's very hit or miss. Sometimes you might actually get an airdrop, sometimes you might not. So I feel like maybe in the future that would be a good implementation in different protocols.
Yeah.
Have you ever used Ricochet Exchange?
Uh, Good question. I've definitely looked at it, but I'm not really a fan of dollar cost averaging, so I haven't actually used it. No.
Cool. It's good to know. I just wanted to. I wanted to know about
Yeah,
that.
sorry, Mike.
Yeah, Mike is probably going to be listening to this. It's all right. I like dollar cost averaging outside of Ricochet. Even if that app didn't exist in the future, I would probably use that method, because I take a certain amount of money every month and I use that to continuously buy Bitcoin at the moment. And I feel like it's nice to see the number constantly going up, and it's nice to be able to buy at different price ranges instead of buying once. And as you see, like in the last couple of days, it went down maybe like 10% or something. So it's a viable strategy, but I also understand why some people probably wouldn't like that. Out of all the DeFi stuff that you use, what is your favorite kind of platform or use case?
Oh my God, that's a tough question. I mean, right now I'm really getting into these options protocols. And to be fair, I'm probably not the right person to explain them. I don't have any formal finance training, so this is all very new to me. Um, if I was to mention one, I would mention Lyra, which is on Optimism. It's an options trading platform. What I like about it is, again, like there's that, it's a two-sided protocol. So there's the side where you're just depositing USDC, providing liquidity to the trades, um, and you get paid to do so. And so, like, essentially, right now, I just opened it up. It looks like a USD deposit providing liquidity to the Ethereum marketplace, vault or marketplace, however you want to call it, is providing about 8 to 16% APY. And that's where I kind of like to be right now. I do have most of my crypto funds in USDC anyway. Um, and I people are really excited about these options markets. Like, and it's kind of a new thing in crypto. And I think a lot of people, the next time there's a bull market, a lot of people will be using these. So it's a great idea to understand how they work, which side of the marketplace you want to be in, um, how it works, what your expectations should be, when you will get wrecked. Because none of this stuff is without risk, right? It's 8 to 16%, but for example, the Solana market right now, because Solana is down like 30% or something in a day, like you have to pay out those options as a liquidity provider, and so you're taking a giant hit paying out those puts or whatever. And so like that 17% you were earning is totally negated by the fact that you have to actually pay people when the marketplace moves wildly in one direction. So there is no, golden bullet. I think research, understanding how something works before you put your money in it is key, because there is no insurance. This is very nascent. Like, you have to do your own research. Everyone says that, but not a lot of people do it. Start with a small amount, put in $100, wait for a month, see like what your returns are. Is it what you expected? When did it not work out? Um, the worst thing is to do something like what I've done, right? When I first got into DeFi, it's like, oh, I'm earning 250% on this token. They're just going up, up, up. Like, I'm just going to put as much money as I can right now. How much money can I move out of my bank account right now into this thing? And it was not the right idea. Lost a lot of money that way. Start small, learn, understand what you're doing, really read the docs, right? Ask smarter people than you. There's always a smarter person somewhere. There's lots of smart people on Twitter just giving this information away for free. Use the resources available to you.
So I would actually like to ask you more about this because, like you said, everybody says you should do your own research, but a lot of people don't do that, and they either watch a single YouTube video or do a single Google search, and that's as far as they'll take it before depositing any money into a protocol. Is there a specific process that you take when you're interacting with a new protocol? I know you mentioned that you put in a very small amount and you see how that works. But beyond that, what would a what would it look like for you to actually start interacting with a new protocol?
It depends what it is, but yeah, at this point, I'll start with a very small amount, and that's going to be different for everyone. So I'm not going to say number, but something small that and a mistake I've often made was kind of depositing some amount of money, like $234.50, and then kind of forgetting what I put in, and then having to do this like on-chain Etherscan detective work to figure out like, wait, did I actually make money? Did I actually lose money? So just keeping notes on how much you put in, what the advertised percentage was at the time of when you put it in. That's also important because that only exists in the interface. You'll never find out. Like if you don't write it down, a month from now, the percentage is going to go down to 2%. And you're like, wait, why did I deposit in here? Wasn't this 30%? Well, maybe it was, but like if you didn't write it down, you're going to question yourself. Checking in on your deposit, seeing what's going on with the protocol. Um, that's the one biggest piece of advice. I think the second piece of advice is, there really is, it's going to sound silly, but there's good resources on Twitter. I mean, there's people that write these beautiful threads. They really explain to you how things work. And they're just doing it to like gain followers, to share knowledge. They don't really, it's not like they're selling you anything. They're not getting paid by the protocol. I mean, if they are, that's an issue. But a lot of the times these accounts just want to share what they've learned and kind of gain followers and gain some, respectability in the field. So Twitter's actually not a bad resource if you're following the right people. Three, I would say there's usually docs, right? How does this thing actually work? Not everyone is savvy enough to read a smart contract. If you are, that's great. Do it. Read the smart contract, see what's going on there. But maybe even the docs could be enough to, know what is this token you're getting? What is the tokenomics behind it? Where is this yield coming from? When will you get wrecked? Like, when will the yield go down? Is there incentives? A lot of that stuff is just explained right on the website if you find that. And other than that, yeah, I mean, you know, look at some YouTube videos. It can't hurt. Like it shouldn't just be one thing where you watch a YouTube video and ape in. But I think the combination of all these strategies together gives you a full view. And sometimes this all leads to paralysis, where you find something cool and you want to put your money in, and then you kind of miss out. Um, but it's better to miss out than just like lose all your money, man. That'd be my piece of advice.
I agree. So just to recap and make sure that I understood what you're saying, one is to take notes, like for say how much you deposited, how much you made after a certain amount of time. Two is to look at docs, try to understand what exactly is going on. A lot of the times, these protocols they have a website for documentation, and they explain everything that's happening in a very organized way. Three, use Twitter as a resource, and I completely agree. Twitter is a very good resource. There's a lot of very good information there. I've found it to be helpful a lot of times. You can also know if you're about to get wrecked on Twitter. So if you're already in some kind of protocol, the first place you're going to hear the bad news is probably going to be Twitter. And then four, I would say, maybe I'm getting this wrong, but surrounding yourself with a knowledgeable community, whether that be Discord communities of the protocols themselves or just friends you've made along the way in this whole DeFi
Mhm.
world. Would you say that's
Yeah,
right?
yeah. I'll say 3 and 4 are kind of one and the same. Like surround with yourself with good people on Twitter, good people on Discord, and actually read what they write. Don't just scroll through Twitter and you see one tweet and like, oh, that's cool. Like, click at it, see what the comments are, what is the other view on this subject, what are they really saying, how many different apps they're listing, go into those apps, are they similar, are they different, really, really like dive a little bit deeper on Twitter than just scrolling through it quickly. And something else that you said, that on Twitter you kind of find out about things sooner than anywhere else in this space is so true, right? Like, I mean, when the whole Luna collapse was happening, I mean, I found out that it was depegging like 4 days before, and I thought it was just kind of panic. I kind of ignored it, whatever, whatever. But I learned from that, right? And this time, when the FTX situation was happening, um, whether it was true or not, I knew that there's going to be a response from the market. So what did I do? I went and I sold all my ETH because, like, Bird, fool me once, shame on you, right? Fool me twice, can't get fooled again. Quoting George Bush there, but anyway, yeah, like on Friday, like there was already people talking about FTX and like a little bit of a bank run, and there was like all this drama. And I'm like, even if this is not true, like the market will take a 5% dip, 10% dip. I don't know what it's going to be. And then maybe it's going to rebound really quickly, but maybe it won't. And honestly, this is like the worst case scenario. It turns out they don't have enough liquidity. They're trying to sell FTX, dumping Solana tokens, dumping all sorts of stuff on the market. And I'm really happy that I just went with my gut and just kind of dumped, right?
I want to talk to you about your experience with Terra. And I also want to maybe figure out what the similarities and differences are between that situation with the Terra Luna collapse and what's going on right now with FTX. You did mention you keep all of your crypto in USDC. I also want to know why you chose USDC over something like DAI or USDT or any of the other stable coins that are available. So maybe we could start there. What makes you trust USDC specifically over the other ones?
Good question, and I probably don't have a super great compelling reason. There's some FUD around USDT and their auditing processes, which are probably just FUD. I think like having met a couple of people that work at Circle, and kind of understanding that they are a pretty reputable company. They do have a legitimate business model. They make a ton of money. Their audits are supposedly way better. I think that in general, the sentiment in crypto is that USDC is the safest, at least for Americans. So I just kind of go with that. I try not to reinvent the wheel there. I think DAI is also great. It's decentralized. I think, and I could be wrong about this, but I think like kind of moving DAI into your bank account is just a little bit more complicated than Circle, because Circle you can actually go, USDC is Circle, you can actually go through the company Circle and actually redeem it for dollars in a bank account. So if all other things just implode, I don't know, Coinbase goes out of business, you can't do normal crypto activities, Circle hypothetically should still cash you out, and DAI might not, right? So that's kind of my reasoning. It's not a great reason, but I think that's kind of the sentiment in general in crypto.
I recall that you were one of the people that lived through the collapse. You had some tokens invested with them, and you were very active during that time. Would you mind sharing that story with us?
Oh, sure. Yeah, so for the longest time, I've seen algo coins collapse before, algorithmic stable coins collapse before. And so I kind of kept saying that, oh, this is silly. We're doing the same thing again. That doesn't work. Stable coins need to be collateralized, fully collateralized, or or they just don't work. And so for the longest time, I was singing that tune, and I was like, "Oh, Luna is silly. Luna is silly." I was trading Luna. Don't get me wrong, because just going up and up. So I was actually making good money just trading the token, Luna token. And so that made me pretty happy, and maybe a little bit more bullish on Luna in general, just because I was making money. But eventually, I saw that like the market cap of USD, which is like 20 billion, right, or 15 billion. I don't remember exactly what it was, but it's a lot of money. Like a lot of people who are probably way smarter than me figured that this thing is different somehow. Is this like Luna UST pair being on its own chain and backed by whoever it was backed by was safer than all the other algorithmic stablecoins that failed in the past. And so I decided to just kind of ape in, put my kind of cash reserves into Luna, earn that 15%, and for 2 months, sure enough, I was earning the 15% or whatever it was. So, 3% on your USD in 2 months is a great return. But then obviously it started imploding, and I should not have been surprised. But at that point, I was a little bit naive, I guess. I kind of willingly forgot what I knew about algorithmic stablecoins. And when it started the pegging, I was like, it's $20 billion. They have a ton of money in Bitcoin and all this stuff. They'll secure the token. It's gonna be fine. This is just somebody's trying to like make it. Somebody's trying to attack it, so I'm not gonna pay too much attention to it. But sure enough, I mean, the whole thing goddamn collapsed. Luckily, I didn't wait to see the bottom. There's at one point I took a pretty big loss on what I thought was a safe deposit. But some people who probably don't check crypto Twitter every day and weren't following what's happening as closely as I was, their deposit probably went to 0 or 10% or 20%. That's crazy unfortunate, and that was a giant blow to crypto. And for crying out loud, please let's not make that mistake again. Let's not use algorithmic stablecoins. I mean, like Frax is cool. It's 90% backed by collateral, 10% by algorithmic, whatever. But why? Like, why do we need to reinvent this wheel again? Like, it's not a good idea. Like that 10%, even if it's only under collateralized by 10%, that 10% goes to someone, and it's just taking risk you don't need to take. That's the bottom line. Like use DAI, use USDC. There's no reason to reinvent this wheel.
Uh, it sucks to see how many people lost a lot of money event. And I don't agree at all with the algorithmic stablecoins. You can't predict the future with so many different like variables that are also affected by other things. If it's not backed 1-to-1, there's a huge possibility that somebody's going to take that L, and I hope that it'll never be me or anybody that we could explain this to. But people are still going to make new algorithmic stablecoins. There's still some, I think, on the market right now. So yeah, if you're trying to hold your crypto, don't hold it in algorithmic stablecoins. That's the best advice. Did you have any? You said you had ETH in FTX recently.
No, I never use centralized exchanges except for kind of going on ramp and off ramp. And to be fair, these days there are better solutions like Juno or Fluid where you actually don't need a centralized exchange at all. You can send money directly from Arbitrum to a bank account. So
Really, I didn't know
yeah,
about this.
yeah, they're pretty neat. I mean, I honestly haven't used them much because I just don't go between my bank account and like on chain too much. But I know they work. I know people that use them. So especially if you're getting paid in crypto, you can get paid on Arbitrum or transfer it to Arbitrum and use a tool like Juno, which is available in the United States, to just go directly into your bank account. The other one that I like is Fluid. It's a much smaller project. It's called Fluid Finance. There's a couple of cool things they're doing that's a little bit different. I think it's a little bit more experimental. So I don't know if I would necessarily like just recommend to like move big amounts of money through it. But yeah, I mean, centralized exchanges, I think, are just eventually going to disappear. Like, this isn't a long-term business plan. Like, people could go in there and trade back and forth and pay fees to these exchanges, but I don't know why people do that. And yeah, right now they serve as an on-ramp and off-ramp, so you don't really have a choice. You have to pay them a fee just to move your money into a bank account. Um, But well, I said you don't have a choice. You do have a choice, but a lot of people think you don't have that choice. So
Yeah, it's
yeah,
much more difficult to find like on ramping is not that hard at the moment. I feel like there's different websites and resources that let you do that easily and quickly. Off ramping is a little more complicated. They're usually like region locked. Like for example, there's a company called Ramp that operates in Europe that allows you to
Mhm.
on ramp and off ramp, and their off ramp is only available in Europe. They don't allow people to off ramp in the United States. And as you said, Juno allows you to off ramp, but it's like locked to the United States. So, and for the sake of convenience, people use Binance, FTX, Coinbase, whatever, and they think that that's their only option. Hopefully, that in the future, one of the most exciting ways to deal with this problem for me has been Ledger Live's card. So they're partnered with a bank called Banks, and they allow you to deposit crypto. That crypto gets automatically converted into fiat as you purchase. You get a MasterCard like any other MasterCard for any other bank, and there you go. You have this way of using your crypto in real life without having to necessarily move funds between so many different services. So I
Yeah, and
hope to
there's a
see
number
more
of
of
other
that.
projects that are doing that, where you get a card and you could spend your crypto using a Visa or Mastercard. So that part of the business is going to go away, I think, for centralized exchanges. And yeah, there's no reason to keep using them. Get savvy with it. Try these new apps. That's what we're here for, kind of, to explore and create new frontiers.
That's very true. Thank you for sharing all this valuable knowledge. I think this is going to be helpful for me and hopefully for people that are listening in. I want to. I'm very cognizant of your time. Again, thank you for doing this. I have a couple more questions related to DAOs. I know you said that you're interested in a DAO called Empire DAO. I'd like to ask you about it. Maybe if you could share some information around that.
Okay. So Empire DAO is actually not a real DAO, really. Their goal is to become a DAO. But what they've done is they created this space in New York City. They rented a big building right in Manhattan, 190 Bowery, and they turned it into this kind of Web3 co-working. I've been there a couple of times. The space is just absolutely amazing. There's teams from Near, Solana, and a couple of other protocols that I probably can't name right now. There's a lot of innovation happening there. They have like an event almost every single night where a bunch of investors, developers, artists come together, showcase what they're doing, trying to get other people interested in it. It's really a wonderful place for kind of random collisions between people to happen, and wonderful collaboration to stem from that. They've already launched like 15 different ventures out of that space in the last like 8 months. And I don't know if that number is correct, but that's kind of something that's in my head. So somebody must have said that. um, and their goal is to become a DAO. Their goal is to actually, they're launching these vending machines in New York State, which are going to be fully decentralized. So anyone could invest in them as little as $10, as much as, whatever the max is. And they already got some legislature passed in New York State to allow them to do this, so that they can actually put a physical object as a decentralized entity and decentralize the profits from it. And so this is just cutting edge stuff in regulation and real world application of decentralized organizations. So while they're not exactly a DAO, they're planning to become a DAO, and they're doing a lot of very cool DAO stuff.
I personally run a small meetup. I met you through a much bigger meetup in the United States, and this whole process of getting people together that work in this field from all over and giving them a place to go, regardless of how long they've been doing this or what their status is, I feel is very important. There's a lot of very, very smart people that work in DeFi and in crypto in general, and they don't have a place to go. All the people that I work with, we all live in different countries and different places. We don't have like an office space that we can go to, and I think that needs to change. We need to have physical locations where people could sit down with each other, because that drives innovation and it drives change. So hopefully we get to see more DAOs like Empire DAO in the future. I think that that's a very, very important goal for people to work towards, and I'm happy to see so many different meetups all over the world and different events like how ETH, like how all the ETH Warsaw or ETH Denver, all like they throw these events all over the world and allow people to come together and work on things together. It's really exciting. So last question for you. Do you have a favorite DAO? And if so, what is it?
Favorite DAO. Like, are we talking like maybe let me answer this with 2 parts. I think the best DAO out there right now, as far as I could tell, is MakerDAO. I think you mentioned earlier in this podcast they've done this deal with Huntington Valley Bank, and I think they actually did a deal with another bank already, where they're using DAI to uh, lend in the real world to banks and get a very stable yield from that. Um, I think that's incredible. I think the fact that there's a trust out there that is collecting money from a bank by giving them DAI, and the beneficiary of that trust is a smart contract address. That is just mind blowing and amazing and way ahead of its time. And a lot of people are going to emulate that in the future. And I'm all for it. I also think like the way they're governed, like people are actually involved in the governance, and they're almost involved a little bit too much. Where sometimes there's this decision paralysis again, where different factions with a MakerDAO voting different ways, and like they're not really making decisions, so it's not perfect. But I think there's people being so involved in that DAO and making such big things happen, and also not fucking up. It's great. In terms of like my favorite DAO, I think like what Empire DAO is doing is a lot of fun. Um, I think they're also really moving the ball forward towards real world applications. If I was to do one more, just to mention something, I think Links DAO is kind of neat. It's a golf focused DAO that they've sold these NFTs and they've raised a bunch of money, and they're trying to buy a real world golf course where every NFT holder is a member and can play for free, and also have it be kind of a meeting space for Web3 people. I think that's super neat. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if that like have like really a favorite one that like I'm super involved in. I think there's a lot of evolution that still needs to happen in this space for that to be the case. But yeah, I guess that would be my cop out of that question.
Well, I from what I heard, I feel like you're really into DAOs that are making something happen in the real world versus just doing like what we do online all the time. And
That's a
so
very
thanks
fair
for
summary.
sharing that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a very
Thanks
fair
for
summary.
sharing
There's
that.
definitely DAOs that are cool that I mean I don't remember like the name, but there's a couple of DAOs that actually do provide like gig work for people.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and they're also pretty decentralized and actually ran like a real DAO, and they have real life profit because they collect fees from connecting people to uh, service providers. So that's also super cool. I think any DAO that has some kind of a cash flow business, at least now or down the line, that's what I'm into.
I see. I learned a lot throughout this whole podcast. It was very informative, and I'm really grateful for your time. Is there anything you'd like to shout out, like some maybe your Twitter or anything that you want to share?
Yeah, sure, man. Follow me on Twitter. I am at 0x DeFi bro. um, and join our Discord at DeFi Philly. We can include a link to that.
Yep.
It's a great community, I think. Yeah, that's it.
You heard it here, guys. So on the East Coast, DeFi Philly is doing a lot to help people meet up and find different opportunities in this space. So check the links out in the description. This has been episode 18 of Decentra Talks. Thank you so much, Paul, for joining, and we'll see you guys in the next one.